Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our fourth episode of the Perspectives Pod. I'm Malcolm, joined here by my wonderful kids, Joseph and Simone. Guys, say hello.
Hello.
Yo,
Yo. um, Today is the 23rd of February. I can't believe we're almost out of February. We're almost into March. It is flying by. Lots has been happening. We're going to talk a couple of issues not related to Trump and politics. We're going to talk about Major League Baseball. We're going to talk about IVF. We're going to talk about a few other things. Um, but anyway, I hope everybody's been doing well wherever you are. We appreciate you viewing in. Apologies for the delay in getting episode 4 out. Sometimes life happens and we can't get an episode out as quick as we'd like. Next week, we will be recording another episode. Unfortunately, Simone will be on vacation, so she will be out of the country. But Joseph and I will probably put something together next weekend while Simone is out. She gave us her blessing. She said, "Yeah, you guys go ahead." So we do
Yep.
appreciate that. I mean, we are a
Mhm.
team, but anyway,
Which
so
is
yeah,
just fine.
you know, we'll do our best.
we definitely know we can talk at length about just
Hmm.
about anything.
Yeah,
Definitely,
you'll be
definitely.
fine.
Let's go ahead and get started. This time, I'm going to go with Joe starting first. Joe, what talk to us about your topics? What's topic number one?
Well, the first thing is, in my opinion, the most important thing, but only by a small amount, and it's what we do in this current day and age in the United States, where we feel like everything's crashing down, and us average people aren't sure what to do. You know, we know what's happening in the executive branch, but I don't I don't have a pass to go in the White House. We know what's happening with our Congress people, but in my case, my Congress people don't give a damn, frankly. And I'm sure the same is true for a lot of people across the country. But it's
Well,
important to not. I'm sorry.
it certainly feels that way. You
Oh,
know,
it definitely feels that way. Yeah.
especially if your
And
congressperson isn't of your party, then you may think that they don't really care about your issues. So
it's very true. And even within that, there's a spectrum. There are
yeah,
some people on the opposite end who may not like your perspectives, but they'll at least hear you out. There
right.
are others who might openly laugh and say, call someone who cares. And then there are others who might, as we saw recently, get you pulled out of their town hall and possibly arrested for daring to speak up.
You're talking about the former NFL kicker, Kluwe, I think is his last name, something like that. Yeah.
No, that is something else that happened. But I'm talking about a town hall that, and I don't remember the congressman's name, but it was a town hall being held, and this woman spoke up in the town hall.
Are you talking
And
about in Georgia?
I may have been in Georgia. She spoke up, and someone who wasn't in uniform pulled her out of her chair and pulled her away as the congressman was mocking her and saying, among other things, she's decided to speak up, and now she suffers the consequences.
Oh no, I can't believe it. I'm not familiar with this.
I'll post the link in the show
In the
notes.
show notes.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah,
send you the link after we're done here. But it was just about the most totalitarian instance
right.
of action I've seen since the 70s. I mean,
That's unbelievable.
it
That's
was.
unbelievable.
And this is part of where fighting engagement apathy comes into play.
Yeah.
In that video, some people were recording her, as well as the person who recorded the video itself,
Uh-huh.
but no one actually made a move to stop her from being pulled out. And
Okay.
I understand why. The bystander effect is real, and there's also a lack of certainty on, is she breaking a law?
Well,
Is
explain what you mean by the bystander effect, because it would seem to me that if someone, I mean, it depends on especially with our divided culture today, depends on what sort of culture she's submerged in. Is she submerged in a more rightward culture? Because I guarantee you, if this would have happened in Manhattan, no, no, they wouldn't have been pulled out. Or if they would have been pulled out, they'd have been pulled back in, and there would have shit would have probably hit the fan. So it depends
well,
on where you are.
I I think we all think that, But
Yeah.
I think when it happens is a different story a lot of times. Sometimes that will happen. A lot of
Mhm.
times there are people who every day, every time, if something happens on their watch that they know is wrong, they'll step in.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, myself included, will think they'll do the right thing. They'll see something happening they know is the wrong thing, and then they freeze, or they hesitate because is should can I do that? Is this, and they start second
Uh,
guessing themselves, and
okay. Okay.
it's a very pervasive effect that is the reason why a lot of times you'll see video of horrible things happening, but no one's stepping in. And it
Right.
certainly happens more in areas prone to traditionalist views. And
I,
that's not so much an indictment of these views, but
yeah.
it's, if
You
you
know,
trust in inherent goodness and inherent rule of law, then if anything's out of sorts with that, you'll instinctively think, well, that's wrong.
right.
And that's just a symptom of a traditionalist view of thinking versus a non-traditionalist view. It's
Well,
not good.
there are ways that you can go about. First off, if you see something that is blatantly wrong, that someone's being attacked, some offense is being committed, you can become involved in a myriad of ways. It doesn't mean you have to directly. If you're worried about your safety, get on your phone, call the police, but do something. Don't just ignore it. Because, give you an example, aside from this person, there have been several instances throughout the country of someone being sick or hurt, laying on a sidewalk, laying on the street, and people walking by and not even stopping to help.
Mhm.
And to me, that's unconscionable. But that's, for whatever reason, I don't know if you want to call that the bystander effect or what, but to me, that's inexcusable. If you see someone hurt, or if you see someone upon whom an offense is being committed, you can either get involved directly, or if you're worried about your safety, get on the phone, call the police, tell them where it's happening, but you got to do something. You have a moral obligation.
And the important thing is to make sure something is done. And
Yeah.
I say it that way because in this instance with this woman, there are rumors that the person who pulled her aside was a non-uniform sheriff. And
Okay.
if that's the case, then if you were to call the police, nothing would get done. So in that case,
Yeah.
in this specific instance,
Right.
people step in physically. People stop him from pulling her out. She wasn't breaking any laws. She was speaking her mind in a town hall. There was no threats
What
of
was she
violence
talking
or
about?
anything.
Do you remember what the issue was that she was addressing?
All I saw is like the 5 seconds before they started pulling her away. It's
Okay.
possible that she was more inflammatory beforehand, but based on all evidence we have, she
Yeah.
was speaking, shouting, but not screaming. And a town hall is frankly going to be an affair where people are going to speak their mind, and as long as they're not drowning out everyone else,
Well,
then
yeah, you're
yeah,
right, and that's what town halls are for.
yeah,
And
it's where you speak your mind, and maybe you're in the minority in a town hall, but you still
yeah,
have the right to say what you're going to say. Do not have you certainly are not subject to being pulled off by ununiformed people or people acting in uniformed authority.
not at all. That's
So
Nazi tactics.
it is brown shirt, full
Yeah,
blown
yeah,
SS tactics, and that's where I say reject apathy, and you put yourself at a certain level of risk in that instance because maybe you'll get pulled away too. They
yeah,
might punch you, but if we operate from a perspective of protect ourselves from any and all possible risk first, then do the right thing,
right.
the other side isn't operating by that. They are taking risks, and
Hmm.
they're going to eventually win in that battle, so to speak.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
saying get your face masks on and get your Molotovs out. No, but you
yeah,
can act directly. You can stop them physically without having to be violent. Sometimes even just five other people standing up and standing in front of someone
yeah.
trying to do that will stop them. You don't have to raise a hand.
And I think, to me, that's a direct violation of the First Amendment, because the First Amendment addresses freedom of speech that's being quashed by the government.
Yes.
She's at a governmental function. She's speaking her mind, and uh, she's being silent,
Influenced. Yeah.
and that's a violation of her rights.
And even if this person who was pulling her away was a private citizen, the congressman in question was encouraging it. He was aiding and abetting it by openly mocking her while it was happening.
I have to see this because I'm familiar with. Um, I saw a couple of days ago a video of because Congress is in recess now, and so all the Congress people have left DC, gone back, or most of them have left DC, and they've gone back to their districts, and they're meeting with their constituents in sessions such as town hall meetings discussing various issues. And there was one in a suburb of Atlanta, and a woman was speaking to this congressman. I want to say his name is Robertson or Robinson, something like that. And he's Republican. And she was asking him about a particular issue, and things started to escalate. But I am not aware of her being pulled out. So anyway, we
This,
can
this
address.
happened. This happened recently. I think it
Yeah,
happened late last afternoon. So maybe there's more information that'll come out. But
it may be the same issue. Post the link in the show notes, and I'll look mine up as well. They may be the same one. But
absolutely,
go ahead though, Joe. I'm sorry. I don't want to keep interrupting you.
no, it's no problem. I mean, this is a very contentious issue, and I hope that passions are heightened around this because they need to be. We need to
Yeah.
operate competently and with thought, but at the same time, a little fire is important because this
Yeah.
is not just a transgression of free speech; it's a
Right.
transgression against our way of life, our government, the entire foundation upon that which we were formed. To
Uh-huh.
say nothing of the other recent examples of a modern day 1776 vibe, if you want to phrase it that way, such as Trump declaring himself king in a tweet,
Yeah.
mostly a joke, but at the same time, I don't like to see my president joking about being the king.
No, no one before him has ever done that.
Yeah, because you just don't do that. You understand the foundational principles of us leaving the monarchy
Well,
because of
understand what he's doing though. What he's
yes,
doing is he's planting the seed for eventually running for a
declaring
third
himself
term.
king. Yeah, yeah, like he's
Yeah.
continually talked about the third term as a
Yes.
joke, like he joked about being dictator for a day, and something a lot of people refuse to admit or refuse to accept is that jokes can become reality. And
Sure.
a funny example, there's a word called yeet that came around about 15 years ago. It means to throw something. You say yeet when you throw something. When I first heard that word, I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. I refused to say it.
Right.
Then eventually I saw enough people saying it ironically where, okay, yeah, ironically, yeet, yeet. Now yeet is in my goddamn vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
If you joke about something long enough, you'll become familiar with it, and eventually it becomes less of a joke and more of just a thing. And
Sure.
yeet is a fun word. Totalitarianism is not such a fun word, and it's an even less fun way of government.
Correct. Correct.
All these jokes about, well, recently Elon Musk made a little joke where he made an account on Twitter X, whatever the hell he calls it,
Yeah.
called Hitler Gov, and it was Adolf Hitler with quotes from Adolf Hitler. He made it an official U.S. government account just for like an
Wait,
afternoon.
he made it an official U.S.
Yeah, Twitter has a label where they can label an account an official government account, and Hitler Gov was labeled an official government account for about 3 hours, and then it was disabled and the account was hidden. But
Okay.
it's just
We need to post links.
everything that we're talking about, we're going to have links to in the show notes. So don't
Absolutely,
worry,
because
viewers. We're
yeah,
going to make sure you can see this for yourself.
people need to see this because this is just unheard of. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. It was surreal seeing it because yes, it was a joke, it was a juvenile thing, but Elon Musk is, no matter what your perspective on what he's doing and what Trump's not doing, he is a very high up official in the United States government who has international influence.
Right.
And he's joking about Hitler being an official government persona.
Well, I mean, he is
That's
a right wing fascist sympathizer.
he
He's
is.
got sympathies toward white supremacy. He's
And
from
this isn't
originally
like
from South Africa.
editorializing. This is his support of AFD, a known right wing party,
Yes.
his support of Trump, a known far right figure, his support of everyone associated to him, as you mentioned, his roots
Yeah.
in South Africa with his parents who were well known for being, let's say, dismissive of modern South African government principles.
Right.
They're deeply rooted in this apartheid worldview.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
that's just factual information. That's not us trying to extract
No, not at
our
all.
opinions from what he's done. That's the Nazi salute.
Right.
And
Oh,
that was, yes,
well,
it's
you're familiar with, speaking of Nazi salute, you're familiar with the most recent occurrence of a Nazi salute, right?
Steve Bannon, I believe.
Steve Bannon at CPAC. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
which I wish I could say was beyond the pale for CPAC, but they did just a few years ago call themselves domestic terrorists. So it's just the latest in transgressions, but it is still a considerable transgression.
yeah. What would drive, Steve Bannon or anyone, other than maybe his effort to once more tweak the libs? All right, let's just say his reason for throwing the Sieg Heil at CPAC was just to tweak the libs, to piss off the left. It's irresponsible because you make it seem like that's acceptable. Pretty soon, you're going to see more and more people do that to allegedly tweak the left or piss off the libs. Well, first, let me just say, this world you know uh, isn't divided between liberals and conservatives. This world, people are very diverse and complex. I am not a liberal. I am definitely a Democrat. I consider myself more of a moderate, between center left, but I am not a liberal. I don't consider myself a liberal. But that kind of shit pisses me off because of what the Nazi salute represents. So for anyone to do that and be a part in any way, whether in center or peripherally, to our federal government, our government, federal, state, local, it doesn't matter. When you do this, it's unacceptable, it's offensive, and it should never be normalized. And it just worries me that that's within a month. Within a month, roughly, we've had two people, one a former advisor to the president, one a current advisor to the president, who've both thrown up Sieg Heils.
They have
Who's next?
more people because that's the root of the concern here. I understand some people may see that and say it's a tasteless joke and it should be condemned, but it shouldn't be acted against because it's an expression of free speech. And
Right.
I understand that perspective. I am a former free speech absolutist because the importance of being able to express your thoughts, no matter how volatile they may be, is a foundational principle of democracy. But if it in a broader sense, it's considered the tolerance paradox, where if you
Yeah.
tolerate everything, those who are intolerant will gain a foothold in your society,
Right.
and that's where we're at now.
Well, and let's
Yet
face
it's
it,
just a
right.
joke.
Your rights. There's an old saying: "Your rights end where my nose begins."
Mhm.
Regarding free speech, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? When
Well,
there's no fire. So
yes,
there are limits to our rights, but they're common sense limits.
yeah.
Um,
Well, at least we assume they're common sense limits. But
right, right,
the root of the issue, or I should say, the root of this concern is if we keep letting them make these kinds of jokes,
right.
we don't need to guess where they're going to end up. We just look to history.
Uh-huh.
We keep saying we're in 1933.
Right.
Depending on how things are going, we could very well be in a later year, 1934, 5, 6, because while the transition of government from Germany's republic to Germany's dictatorship only took a little under 2 months, it took several years after that on paper for it to become an oppressive reality.
Yeah. But
So,
remember though, the German democracy at that point was nowhere near the maturity level that the American democracy is currently.
that's
You
true.
know,
Germany had a lot of tumult, which is partly why were such things were so unstable that the Nazi Party was able to gain a foothold.
correct. Which is, our democracy, our system of government, our checks and balances are very ingrained. Um, so we have a good chance of withstanding what's going on now. There is damage. There will continue to be damage as long as Trump and his administration are not held in check.
We have a chance, but it's not going to happen just because of our checks and balances.
Correct.
They're
Correct.
in place as a guidepost, but
Yes.
as we're seeing, if people just ignore these checks, for example, if Congress just refuses to act on Trump asserting his authority over the purse, so to speak,
Yeah.
then the checks and balances on paper don't matter. So at that point, it's up to borrow a very commonly used phrase these days, we the people.
Yeah.
And
Well, and, Congress has the power of the purse.
they
They
do. They're just
control it.
choosing to abdicate that power. And
Absolutely.
that's where the issue is. That's why people at these town halls, not just Democrats, but Republicans too, people who care about their country are starting to speak up. And it's been slow to start.
Yes.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's been very quick because remember, despite this feeling like we've been in 10 years of Trump land, it's
Yeah.
only been a little over a month. And for things to already get to the point where you've got people shouting up in town halls, where you've got massive crowds being drawn to someone like Bernie Sanders in deeply red districts,
Right.
there's a lot of discontent and it's growing rapidly.
And that's a good thing. And I'm glad.
But it needs to keep growing. We can't just see that and say, all right, well, we're good. Everything's just okay. We have to build
Absolutely
on
not.
that. It has to be even louder.
Right.
We, if we do it now, if
Yeah.
we all lend our voices, I mean all, I know, even, look, I'm in deep red, I'm a deep blue type of person, but you can still lend your voice. Call your congressman, add to their phones. You can reach out to other people in other areas, encourage them to go.
Yeah.
If they live near where a protest is happening, just go there for a little while, make your voice heard, make your presence known. Every little thing may feel like it doesn't do anything, and individually it doesn't, but 1,000 people doing nothing is something.
Yeah.
And it just,
Exactly.
it's a numbers game. The more people we get involved, the greater our impact will be now, and the less possible, I'm butchering that. The more we do now, the less likely it is that we'll have violence occurring later. Because
Oh,
if we do
absolutely.
nothing now,
Yeah.
we're going to have violence later.
And
I
what
don't know.
I would encourage people, I mean, write this phone number down. This is the phone number to Congress in DC, whether it's a senator, whether it's a congressperson. If you call area code 202-224-3121, that's 202-224-3121, then you can be transferred to whoever it is that you're calling, whether it's your senator or congressperson, in New York, Louisiana, Texas, North Dakota, South Dakota, it doesn't matter. Call that number and, of course, have an idea of what it is you want to express.
Mhm.
Um, I would encourage you to be, factual and level in your emotion. Try not to be too emotional and angry, but express your concerns. And that's what they're there for. That's what this phone number is there for, to call them and let them know how you feel. And you're going to get more if you call your congressperson that represents you, you live in their district, your senator, and you let it be known that, okay, this is my name, this is my address, this is where I live, you represent me. I am upset about XYZ. Let them know.
Mhm.
Um,
All
Congress
right.
has been getting lots and lots of phone numbers. I'm sorry, Congress has been getting lots and lots of phone calls recently from many people, including me, about what's going on right now in DC. And you're starting, as Joe just mentioned, we're starting to see some pushback from constituents, from citizens, from voters that are very concerned about what this administration is doing. They didn't vote for this. That some of them may have voted for Trump, but they're like, wait a second, we didn't vote for the dismantling of this program or that program, and we certainly didn't vote for doggy. Some people say Doge. I call it doggy. Going into the servers, computer terminals, and extracting all this personal data of me and hundreds of millions of other U.S. citizens in a country of 350 million people. So people are pissed off, and the Republicans. Once you get angry and you call your congressperson, your senator, and let them know that you're pissed off and they hear this enough, they're going to start to change their tune. because they like being in Congress and they want your vote. They don't want to lose.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
And that matters. Voting matters. I know the pervasive opinion is that it's rigged, it's backroom deals, voting doesn't matter. The reason Elon Musk put $250 million into this election was not because voting didn't matter. He didn't buy the election, he bought the influence of the voters. And then they in turn voted for his chosen candidate.
right.
All this money goes into elections not to pay off the electoral workers, but to
Yeah,
basically manipulate voters.
right.
That's how it is. Our votes do matter.
Yeah,
We need to leverage those votes.
yeah. I don't
We can't
understand.
go on whatever these ads tell us to do.
I can't understand anybody, especially at this point, after what's been happening since 2016. I cannot understand anyone who is of voting age, who is a citizen, who just decides their vote doesn't matter and they're not going to vote. To me, you're being irresponsible. And if that's how you feel, you really shouldn't live here. Of course, you can. You're a citizen. I will support your right not to vote, but I don't understand it when so much is at stake. And if you
I
like
agree.
freedom not to vote, then you want to protect that freedom not to vote. You should vote. I know that sounds ironic, but it makes no sense to me that someone does not vote. That's how you lose your republic. What did Ben Franklin say to the lady when he came out of the Constitutional Convention? She asked him, "Mr. Franklin, what do we have? What is it, a monarchy or a republic?" She asked him. I can't remember, but anyway, his answer was a republic if you can keep it.
Hmm.
So
That,
anyway,
that
we're going kind of long here.
we are, and I'll sum it up by one last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It doesn't matter what you do. It could be as simple as putting up a flyer that has the contact information of your district's congressman around town. It doesn't matter if you're just talking to random people on the street who care to listen. Anything that might get someone to pay attention is important because voting costs very little. It costs really nothing. And if we all do it, we can all get what we want out of voting. The only reason that apathy is so widespread is because the other side of the people who are apathetic don't want you to vote. And the more we act in tandem with our beliefs in voting, the more of a result we'll see.
Yeah,
So, and it doesn't matter who else is next to you in the voting booth. Maybe there's a former Trump voter who voted for him 3 times in a row, and you just can't understand why he'd do that. Maybe it's someone who didn't vote until that election where you're standing next to them. It doesn't matter what they've done in the past in this moment. What matters is that they're willing to do the right thing at the current moment. We
right,
can deal with consequences after the fact. Right now, we just need to stop our democracy from fading away.
right, right. Exactly, exactly. All right. That was
I
great,
just
Joe.
want to say, I
Yeah,
Yeah,
loved how you said in the beginning that you were going to not talk about politics or Trump, and that is all you did for the first half of this.
we're very
You
damaged.
realize that's what you said.
We're very damaged people, Simone. When
Yeah.
we're this in tune with politics, it kind of messes with our heads. So,
Yeah.
this is basically our idiosyncrasies run amok.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, listen. As important as it is, it's hard not to talk about Trump and politics because
You
of
try
the.
harder because
Yeah,
I don't
well,
want to do this.
I'll talk about trying
Moving
harder. I'm gonna let
on
you
to
go next.
something more exciting. The
Go ahead.
Yankees have
Talk to us,
gotten
babe.
rid the Yankees have gotten rid of their beard policy.
Uh-huh.
So they had always required their players to be clean shaven with the exception of a mustache. But now they reverse their policy like every other team in the MLB to allow beards. And you both have those. So
That's
Correct.
this
very true. I'm
I
one
feel like
step
this is
closer
big
to
news.
playing in the Yankees.
What?
I'm one step closer to playing in the Yankees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I thought that this was a very long time coming, although I don't know if it's that important. I mean, was it really stopping any players before who were maybe going to be drafted to play for the Yankees? If they were like beard people and now they were required to shave it? Was that a concern before and they felt like they were losing potential players because of this? I don't know. Or did they just want to follow the Joneses?
Right.
Thought?
Well, I'll tell you where the origin of the policy comes from. The boss, George Steinbrenner, whose family still owns the Yankees. This comes back, gosh, around 1970. I don't know, 74, 75. He had a policy against long hair, against beards. And it was inspired because of Steinbrenner's military background. And he felt that it was important for members of the Yankees to be, clean cut, clean shaven, and disciplined. And that's where that comes from. So, but I don't think I look. Okay, I get it. Football. I'll give you an example. Pro football. You've got some players with long hair, and if I'm playing football and I'm playing against you, let's say I'm a linebacker and you're a running back and you have long hair and that hair is coming out of your helmet. And if I'm trying to catch you and tackle you, I'm going to grab the first thing I can. And if that means I'm going to grab a handful of hair, I'm grabbing a handful of hair. Thank you very much. And I'm going to pull your ass down. But
In
you know,
baseball, that doesn't really matter because no
it
one's catching.
doesn't. It really doesn't. I don't care if a player has a beard or has long hair. Can that player play? Can he hit 426-foot home runs? Can he catch? Does he have an arm for a cannon or a cannon for an arm? Can he throw like Bo Jackson could throw from deep in center field or left field? I forget what position he played. Oh my God, that's what I care about. Can he run fast? So I don't care if the guy's got long hair and if he's got a beard. So what?
Yeah, and I think that's really what it is. It's an issue that doesn't really matter, but it's been a long time coming because it cost the Yankees nothing to remove that
Yeah.
regulation. And there's a non-zero chance they could have had someone of considerable talent who really liked their beard and said, maybe I'll go to the Mets.
Didn't Noah say something like that earlier? Wasn't there a particular player that he pointed out? Noah is a dear friend of Simone's and a really good guy, and he's a big Yankees fan. And we had lunch with him and Simone today, and so he was pointing out that there was a particular player who, what was it? He looked better with a beard or something. I forget.
I don't recall. I do not know. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened. Would that be
Um,
crazy if he turned down what you're saying? He turned down the Yankees because of his beard.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could see that, right, Joe? I could see somebody out of principle saying, well, you know what? I like my beard. I like my beard and I like my long hair.
Is it
You,
a wise decision? Maybe not, but it is a decision. And if they can
yeah,
get that
It is a
player,
choice. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, seriously. Granted, listen, we're talking about the New York Yankees, 28 World Series championships, the greatest, probably the most valuable sports franchise in the world, if not certainly one of the top two. And when it comes to baseball, who wouldn't want to put on those pinstripes? You want to play for the Yankees. What a legacy to say you were a Yankee, man. Come on. But hey, the Mets, they've got a big fat pocketbook. They're willing to spend some money. You can have long hair and a beard over there. So maybe you want to keep your facial hair and your beard, and you want to play for a team that's spending a lot of money on their players because they're serious about getting a championship.
yeah,
Go
they're going for the Yankees. They want to get the Yankee spot.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting, interesting. I mean, I'm glad to see that it's changed. Some more traditionalist folks, you think about because I remember back in the late '70s when people like Ron Guidry played for the Yankees. He had a nice mustache. Thurman Munson, the catcher, he had a nice mustache. They weren't exactly, they didn't have exactly, short hair, but they were more presentable. At least they didn't, according to Mr. Steinbrenner, they didn't look like hippies, I guess, you know. But yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, okay, Simone, what else, babe?
Some less exciting news, but interesting. There is this woman in Georgia,
This is
38-year
more
old woman.
exciting to me. This is very interesting.
Well, there's this woman in Georgia. She's a 38-year-old woman. She's a wedding photographer. She is suing her IVF clinic for accidentally swapping her embryo eggs. She went through the whole IVF process with what she believed were her eggs and a donor sperm. And she went through the whole pregnancy. She gave birth, and the baby that she ended up having was an African American child. This woman was white. From what she remembered picking out, her sperm donor was white.
Yeah,
So her immediate thought was that maybe they swapped out the sperm donors. There was an accident there. There was a mess up there. She ends up having the baby, goes on to raise it for the next 4 or 5 months. And then it comes out that it was not her egg. It was a different woman's egg. and she had to go to court and fight over it and ended up losing. And she had to give this baby that she had raised for 5 months to the original egg owner. Um,
Right.
and it's very sad. But now, since she lost her child, she's suing her IVF clinic, rightfully so.
Yeah.
They even told her that because she had more eggs, they told her that she has another chance. She can do it again. They still have her other eggs, and she doesn't trust them anymore. How is she going to know that those are actually her eggs this time?
Right.
So
She
pretty
was essentially an unwitting surrogate, is what she was.
pretty much.
That's sad, and
Hmm.
having had to give up this child, um, because even though you know the child isn't biologically yours, she gave birth to the child. She had the child. She had custody of the child for what, 5 months? So she becomes attached to that baby. I understand that. I understand that. It was a royal screw up uh, at the hands of this clinic, and it was in Georgia. I want to say they were out of Savannah, if I recall. I looked this up, and it's unfortunate, but this is one of the things that could happen. I mean, we live in an imperfect world. Mistakes are made. This is one of those instances where you don't want these sort of mistakes to occur, and every step should be taken, every precaution should be taken to avoid mix-ups like this, because it's going to cost. They're going to be sued. They're going to have to pay a lot of money for the pain and suffering that this woman endured. But the purpose isn't just to make her whole emotionally, it's also to prevent this sort of thing from ever happening again. That's why you have lawsuits. That's why you sue in, entities such as the clinic for lots of dollars. The clinic should have insurance. I imagine they do.
But
And
even if they don't, I mean, the reputation hit is severe. Who's going to go to that clinic? Who's going to trust them after something like this?
absolutely, not
Yeah.
only them, imagine the effect this could have on other women who are thinking of using IVF and having second thoughts now. Well, what if this happens to me at my clinic in Michigan or in Nevada or in North Carolina? Yeah, I would imagine and I would hope that all such clinics around the country are reviewing their policies to make sure that they do everything conceivable, no pun intended, but everything possible to make damn sure this doesn't happen to any of their patients.
Hmm.
I would not want to have to go through that.
I
This
can't
woman's
even imagine.
38 years old.
I can't imagine what it was like in the delivery room that day when.
Well, I mean, come on, listen.
At the very least, she knew it was a sperm donor situation, so there wasn't any concerns of infidelity. But at the same time, it's a
I don't know if
proposition.
was it a sperm donor snafu, or was it
No, it was the egg, but like, do you mean like the
Her
fact that
initial thought you had
had a
mentioned
sperm?
was,
So it's not
yeah,
like, yeah. And it's
okay?
also the fact that it is her body. Like she would know, you know. But
Well, you
yeah.
know,
I mean, it's
like the man would be more surprised, like if the woman's
that's
like,
true.
if he's white, the baby's black, we're like, whose child is this?
yeah. Who
Yeah,
did you sleep with?
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
this was
understand.
it was just her, no husband. So
Yeah,
And it's extra tragic in my opinion because not only was this terrible mistake that not only did this terrible mistake occur and she got the child she thought she didn't want, she turns out she did want it and she did start to care for the child, and then the child was taken away to someone
it
who,
is interesting how long it went on for. Like
you know,
you wouldn't run the tests
and
immediately in the hospital that day, that week, find out if this is your child or not. I don't really know. Like, did she know immediately after leaving, or did they delay finding out? I don't know.
well, one thing I'm curious as well, did the original egg donor in this instance, does she want the child? Was she
Yeah,
fighting?
she
Okay,
fought for the child, and that's
okay.
why she had to
yeah.
give the
I
baby
do
up.
believe. Yeah, I do believe that the biological parents, they started custody proceedings.
Hmm.
So
Both parents? Why would a sperm
the,
donor
the
do that?
biological parents, according to the news article I'm looking at, and Joe, I'll send you the link. It's to the Guardian. Biological parents started custody proceedings, according to NBC News. Murray, the birth mother, voluntarily gave the child up when she was a few months old, or when he was a few months old. So, granted, the child should go. Of course, the child should go with the biological parents. Uh,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
assuming they want the child. In this case, they do.
yeah,
Yeah.
but just think. I mean, Simone, I think you had mentioned this earlier. Wow, you know, you got your child, you didn't have to give
Yeah.
birth, and it is
Yeah.
biologically your child. So the woman was a
Hmm.
surrogate mother for essentially. Yeah,
But maybe
this is
she really wanted to give birth to her child also. So she also missed out on the opportunity
yeah,
of carrying her child in those first 5 months.
It was just a
absolutely.
mistake upon mistakes, and
Hmm.
it's ultimately the IVF clinic. They're the root of all of this confusion, discontent.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. This is really unfortunate. It's not the first time that there was a switched embryo, believe it or not. An Ohio woman, and I'm reading this from the same article on the Guardian. An Ohio woman was caught in a mix-up and carried another couple's child to term in 2011. A New York couple sued a California-based clinic in 2019 over an embryo mix-up, and two California women gave birth to each other's babies that same year. So this has happened. These sort of mix-ups have happened before, which leads me to believe, okay, guys, this isn't the first time, so there should be procedures in place to prevent this from happening. How many more times does this have to happen until you've got ironclad rules, regulations, and procedures to follow that will severely limit this from happening again?
And it
Anyway,
could be a personnel issue as well. They may have procedures in place. Maybe they had the wrong people. So if the procedures check out, they need to investigate the kind of people they hire to work there. Maybe they need a better attention to detail. Maybe someone fell through the cracks of performance reviews. I don't know, but there's a flaw, a deep
yeah,
flaw they need to address.
yeah, yeah. So for those of you out there thinking of IVF, IVF's a great thing. I have a nephew who he and his wife went through IVF procedures and finally gave birth a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, to a beautiful little boy who is definitely all boy. Goodness gracious, he's running and jumping all over the place, and he's just a sweetheart. So they work. It's a wonderful procedure, but mistakes can be made. So just be careful. Uh, anyway, what else, my dear? What else do you have?
That was it.
Yeah. Okay. The only things I don't really have a whole lot that I wanted to talk about. I was mainly piggybacking off of you guys, but of course I did have some notes in my iCloud Notes app, along with some links. A couple of things that have been happening. You guys have heard about this, I'm sure. Again, regarding Trump, this time regarding Ukraine. Uh,
Mm.
what has happened uh, concerning Ukraine is embarrassing. The way the way U.S. foreign policy has essentially done a 180 away from our allies, our NATO allies, our European allies, and more toward Russia, more toward authoritarianism. It's definitely un-American. I read recently, and the link to the article would be posted in the show notes. What Trump has said is he wants Ukraine to pay $2 for every $1 in aid from this point forward. If we're going to continue helping you, you got to pay us 100% interest. That's extortion. That's something that a mafioso would do. I mean, and Trump is a thug, he is a mafioso. So, in a way, that doesn't surprise me. But that's disgusting. So, it's a shame that we would present that sort of offer to a supposed ally. The reason we've given billions and billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine is to stop Russian incursion upon Ukraine's sovereign territory
And Europe's territory.
and Europe. And listen, speaking of that, Europe is going to be next because if you think while we've got this what's developing into a multipolar society in foreign policy, and I'm not claiming to be an expert. Foreign policy has fascinated me since I was an undergraduate, you've got unipolar world, you've got bipolar, multipolar. Bipolar was when we had the U.S. and the Soviet Union. unipolar was essentially what we had after the fall of the Soviet Union. The United States was really the only superpower. But at that time, and until Trump was reelected last November, we had, what was essentially, well, I don't know if you could still consider it a unipolar world, because China, we we've we were pretty much a bipolar world, because China being so militarily and economically and politically influential. Remember, Russia is a third-rate power. They are a third-rate power economically. They are a third-rate power militarily. They're a paper tiger militarily. Ukraine was kicking the crap out of them.
Russia, I would say, is essentially a regional power, but China, they
That's
were
it.
playing a very economy strong game of building
Yeah,
themselves to be a
yeah,
superpower.
yeah. But what we have now is a multipolar world, and in a multipolar world, you've got more chance for conflict, because what we're going to have, and this is what Trump wants. He wants the Americas, North and South America, for the United States. He wants Putin to go ahead and deal with Europe. Go ahead, do what you want with Europe, and then Asia. That's going to be left to China. And I can assure you that our allies in Europe and in Asia are scared shitless right now, because they feel abandoned by us because of the way our foreign policy has devolved, which it has. We are no longer the good guy. Sad to say, but the United States at this point, we're being looked upon by our former allies, or I guess you could still consider them our allies, but they're looking at us like, what the hell happened to you? You're
I
not
would say
the
that there
guys
are
you once were.
I would say there are former allies. They could become allies again, but it's dependent on our leadership. I mean, if you look at Canada, they're not going to be allied with us as long as Trump's in office. Then they
Correct.
shouldn't be.
Correct.
And I can think of no better example of how far we've gone where Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine, he is very much the unassuming leader before this war started. He wasn't really a very spectacular person. He was
Right.
not a bad person, but not a great person. He's risen up to be this lion like figure for Ukraine, who I guarantee decades from now will be seen at least as a Winston Churchill figure
Yeah.
for Ukraine, if not as a George
Yeah.
Washington figure.
No question
And
about
he's just recently come out and said, if Ukraine is accepted into NATO, I'll resign immediately,
it. Right.
because his goal is not power, his goal is protecting his country. And
Oh,
to
you
have a man of that caliber, of
yes.
this genuine selflessness and leadership, uh, on one end of the spectrum, and then our current president trying to thug his way into owning Zelensky, calling
Oh,
Zelensky
yeah.
a dictator. It's there's no starker contrast for how far we've lost it. Where the most
Correct.
Ukrainian man, I don't want to say American because they are Ukrainians, but they are embodying the ideals we used to embody in our leadership.
Well, yeah,
Currently
correct.
in our leadership.
Correct. I think you're right. I think that's an excellent comparison. He will look. History will look upon him as a Winston Churchill, a George Washington, a Cincinnatus. I know you're a
Mhm.
big fan of ancient Roman and Greek history.
Yeah.
These are men
Just as a
who,
quick aside for anyone who's unaware, Cincinnatus is a dictator of the Roman Republic who, once he accomplished his goals twice, willingly relinquished all power.
yes, yes, and that's something that you have to admire. He returned for his people, did what he had to do, and then left and went back to being a gentleman farmer again. That's the same thing with George Washington. George Washington helped us establish the Republic. He was president 2 terms, and then he went back to farming afterward. My hero, Harry Truman, who I've mentioned before, he left. They didn't even have, believe it or not, many people may not know this, but you know how former presidents, you continue to receive your salary after you leave the presidency, and right now it's around 400, a little over $400,000 a year.
Yes.
Um, when Truman was president, there was no such thing. You left, you had no pension.
Mhm.
So I believe it was under, I want to say it was under Eisenhower, maybe it
I
was
think
under,
you're right. Yes.
who established that former presidents should have, because Harry Truman had to go back to Independence. He didn't have to. He wanted to go back to Independence, Missouri, which is where he and his wife Bess were from. Moved in with his mother-in-law,
Mhm.
right? This was a man who served as an officer in the military in World War One, became a haberdasher in Independence, Missouri, a clothing store owner. He, along with his best friend, Eddie Jacobson. I know my shit when it comes to Harry Truman. Let me tell you, I've read books on the guy, but he admired that sort of leader that steps up for their country, for their people, serves, and then goes back home and resumes a quiet life.
It's
Because
ideal. It's an
another
example to follow.
it is, and you know one thing, another thing that Harry Truman said that I strongly believe in: if you're making money in politics, you're doing something wrong. Harry Donald Trump is making oodles of money using the government, using his position, using this coin that he established to
Yeah.
make billions of dollars. You're doing something wrong. You
And
don't
that's something
make
that a
money
lot
in
of people,
politics. You don't become wealthy in politics. You shouldn't. You shouldn't. You know, and there are lots of politicians on both sides, whether you're Republican or Democrat. There are politicians who go in and accumulate wealth somehow because of inside information. That is wrong. If you go in and you're only making $175,000 a year as a congressperson, sounds like a lot of money. It really isn't. I think they should be paid a lot more personally. I'd be happy if they raise their pay to at least 250 a year because they have to pay for a lot of expenses out of their own pocket.
that's true. A
So,
congressman typically has to have two apartments, one in DC,
yes,
one in their district. They have
yes,
to go to travel back and forth so often to see their
yes.
constituents.
It's not easy. So it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't. They need pay raises and they need them soon. But you shouldn't be making, you shouldn't come out of Congress with a portfolio worth several million dollars when you went into Congress with a portfolio of less than a million, if that.
Hmm.
No, you're doing something wrong. So anyway, that's my speech on that. But there were a couple other notes I had. Something else to think about. I heard this phrase in a recent podcast, Ezra Klein, the Ezra Klein podcast. If you guys ever get a chance to listen to it, very, very interesting. He had Ezra Klein is more left leaning, but he had a conservative analyst from the American Enterprise Institute on his show recently. It was a couple of episodes ago. Fascinating discussion. The guy was very well reasoned, very logical, very intelligent. One thing he mentioned, which I wrote down, was an elected autocrat with a 45% approval rating is less dangerous than one with an 80% approval rating. So while Trump is in the upper 40s now, he's lost some ground, and that's a good thing. He's not as dangerous as if he had. Imagine if his approval rating were over 60%. We'd have a
Hmm.
lot to worry about. So that's a good sign, but don't give up the fight. So
And
anyway,
I'd specifically just like to add to the idea of, we're talking about Trump. We're saying Trump is the root of these issues, and he, at the very least, is heavily involved with these issues. But I would not want to see the pendulum swing so far opposite of Trump that we have someone who wants
communist.
to enact essentially, yeah, borderline communism.
No,
I would be more comfortable with a hardline left than a hardline right figure, but we need someone who can accurately represent the country and who will move us in a positive direction, even if some of us might not think that's a good idea, but they'll do it because they know it's right. But those on the Republican side really need to take a long look at Trump and think, is that really who I want to lead this
yeah,
country? Maybe he's the one who was most electable, but is he really the one I want to see as a president? We
yeah.
used to have Republicans like Reagan, like Nixon before his paranoia overtook him,
Mhm.
like Eisenhower. And they were honorable men. They were decent men who made many mistakes. And on the Democratic side, President Obama was a fantastic president who had quite a checkered result in his tenure, but he was not
Well, and of course,
acting against the country.
we know the reason why he had such a checkered result because Congress was as divided then as it is now, and there were a
That's
lot
a
of
big
things
part, but
that fought.
I'm also speaking of military actions taken and a possible
Yeah,
over reliance on drone
yeah,
strikes. He was not a perfect president. No president is. To
right.
be the caliber of man or person you need to be as president, you're going to have a certain level of megalomania, which actually Obama says directly in his autobiography. You're going to have a force of will necessary to act according to your own manner. And ideally, you have a team of people on your staff that keep you in check
Yeah,
because you
I don't know if I agree with the megalomania part. That's to me, that's a little extreme. He may have said that. I don't agree with it. I do feel that if you're running for national office, you're running for any kind of public office, but especially on the state and national level, it probably takes a little bit of narcissism, and there can be healthy
that's
narcissism.
what he was referring to in a more
Yeah,
eloquent way. But essentially, the idea that out of 300 plus million people, you are the one to do this.
yeah,
That takes a very healthy ego to
yeah,
determine.
yeah. Healthy ego, healthy ego. That's the key phrase because you know I would like to see Trump succeed on behalf of all Americans and on behalf of the country and do what is best for the country. But his desire and his goals are not what is best for this country or for its people. He is clearly an authoritarian who is in it for himself, for self-aggrandizement, for enriching himself materially, historically. He is a megalomaniac, and he's not a
And we
healthy.
deserve better. We all deserve better. Democrats deserve better. Republicans deserve better. Your crazy sovereign citizen neighbor deserves better.
Sure,
We,
sure,
my sincere hope, and this is a pipe dream perhaps, but the thing about pipe dreams is if enough people believe them, they can become reality, is that the 2028 primaries, one, will happen. If anyone is sitting there thinking that elections are over and we're done, we're not there yet. We could
right,
get there, but we're not there yet, and we can stop that from happening. So in 2028, we'll have a hell of an election season between Democratic firebrands that really represent the people's economic interest and Republican stalwarts that understand a measured government is successful, who
right,
want to make sure that everyone has the ability to succeed under their own terms. If we
yeah,
have that, we would have one of the best elections we've seen in decades.
yeah, yeah,
Principled leaders.
right, exactly, which would be wonderful. A couple other things I wanted to touch on. This past Friday evening, there was a Friday night massacre, so to speak, because I'm a veteran, a 9-year veteran of the Air Force. I love my military. I love my Air Force. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown,
Yes.
formerly the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, who rose to the level of chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was fired by President Trump. He was, at the demand of President Trump, he was probably fired by the Secretary of Defense. He was allegedly, according to the Secretary of Defense, he was allegedly a DEI hire. The other person they fired was the Chief of Naval Operations. The Chief of Naval Operations is the highest ranking person in the Navy who sits on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and then you have the different chiefs of each branch of the military. You got the chief of the Navy, this person who's a woman, right? The first woman, she was fired. Okay. So why were they fired? They were fired because they were a person of color, and B, a woman. That's it. This administration seems to feel that there can only be white men serving as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, serving as the chiefs of each of the branches. That's a pile of shit. Because I'll tell you something. We had who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs? I can't believe I can't think of his name. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Clinton, if I'm not mistaken, and he was Secretary of State.
Not
Um,
Donald Rumsfeld.
no, God, no, no,
No,
no.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
What's
getting
the
my
name?
name.
African American. African American. He passed away within the last couple of years. He was outstanding. He was outstanding. He could have run for president. I think he would have done a really good job. And he was a Republican,
Mhm.
a man of fine character and conscience. He did a great job. There is no reason why we could not have a woman sitting on the joint, sitting in the one of the members of the Joint Chiefs. She was doing a fine job, I'm sure. You don't rise to that level unless you have the qualifications. So now Trump wants to replace the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, CQ Brown, with a 3-star. He's going to have to get a waiver because you have to be a 4-star general or admiral in order to serve as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So this person who was a 3-star general in the Air Force does not have the experience, does not have the qualifications to serve in that position. And that's damned unfortunate. But what Trump wants is loyalty. That's what he wants. That should scare the hell out of anybody because he wants to command the military to such a degree that they will go out and do his dirty work. If it even means going against civilian protesters here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Get ready for that.
He
That's
wants
what his
loyalists.
objective is. Okay. So that's the one thing. I'm trying to remember what the other thing was. Oh,
Was it about the FBI or?
I hope, well, Cash Patel, that's for another episode.
Yes.
There's so much happening. But one thing that's concerned me is whether or not our country will fragment. And I've thought about this for a long time, even before Trump, because of the way things were going. There was a book that came out, I don't know, 10 or so years ago, maybe longer, called The Big Sort, and how citizens were starting to sort themselves at that point into, little groups. They were, moving into gated communities and joining groups of people who are like-minded, and they were sorting and they were fragmenting. And at that point, when the book was written, it seemed as if we were not as unified as a country as we had once been. And since that book has been published, we've certainly become more and more fragmented. I hope to God that there is no further fragmenting. And I do hope that we remain one nation, 48 contiguous states, and then including Alaska and Hawaii, of course, to make up our 50, plus our territories. But I do worry about whether or not this country will remain. And
I
I
can
know
say I've seen.
our enemies would love to see us fragment. China would love to see it. Russia would love to see it. All the shit that's going on here, I'm sure they're sitting back and they're ecstatic because they want to see the king of the mountain. When you're the king of the mountain, everybody wants to see you fall.
Mhm.
Well, let's not let that happen because we're stronger together than we are apart. E pluribus unum, out of many, one.
Yeah,
That's the reason why we have that slogan, if you will, on our money. That's what it means. Out of many, one.
and if
We're
you want to see the effect of unification in that sense, just look to Europe. The
yeah,
European Union is essentially the United States in a looser sense, and Ukraine being invaded, the only reason they were invaded by Russia is because they weren't in NATO. If they had the backing of NATO back in 2014,
wouldn't have happened.
yeah, because that's you have to worry about everyone attacking. And
Yeah,
I have noticed moving trends in the United States over the past 10 plus years. There's always been a push by far right radicals, white supremacists, and whatnot
right,
to move to the
right,
Pacific Northwest.
right.
There's a lot of left leaning flight from the South. I am going to be one of them. I understand that I'm part of the shift, but
Uh-huh.
I would prefer to live somewhere colder, but also somewhere with a governor and state leadership that honestly just listens to the people more. It's not
Yeah,
so much that my current state, Louisiana, is right wing, but they don't listen. They don't care about what the
yeah.
people say. They do what they feel they should do.
Right,
And
right.
it's not a healthy government, let alone democracy.
Yeah, yeah. It's
But
I don't know.
it's
I
people
hope
are
it doesn't happen, but we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, we're already at an hour and 3 minutes, and I know we like to try and keep this at under an hour. So let's save any other issues for the next
yes.
episode.
Yes, we try to
Um,
keep to an hour and we definitely don't go over an hour and 10 minutes. That's usually how.
yeah, yeah, we try. So but there will definitely be more that we'll talk about. I'm sure there'll be more news that we'll want to discuss.
And
Because
I will endeavor to not immediately jump into the most obvious news of the day.
no,
Uh,
that's okay. Listen,
well,
this is a good loose conversation.
it is, but there's so much that we can also talk about. And while one of my topics coming up might not be such a good, a positive one, I do want to bring a certain amount of not levity, but look, we've got a long way ahead of us as a country, no matter how things turn
Okay,
out.
well let's save it for the next episode.
Yes, it's important to keep things nice, short, and sweet. And yes,
Yeah, we're going to have a lot more though. Joe and I will be hosting. Simone unfortunately won't be with us. She'll be in Turks and Caicos,
Yep.
right?
you
She's
can take
taking her mom on
You
a
can talk about
vacation.
all the politics you want. I will be having a margarita on the beach.
Yeah, she's
have
taking
a
her mom on a nice vacation, and I think that's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
So
take pictures. I'd love to see.
yeah,
Will
yeah.
do.
So okay, guys, thanks for your time, and we really appreciate everybody tuning in,
Mhm.
and we'll see you again in another week. Until then, ciao.
Adios.